Hey there, and welcome into another episode of the Route 1 Rundown. If you eat, sleep, and breathe Maryland basketball, then this is the place for you. I'm your host, Steve Gorgie, and I'm thrilled to be back for another episode to talk some Terps. But first, a reminder that you can find me all across the internet, all of the various social media platforms, at the same handle, at Gorg on Sports, so make sure you're following me there. And another reminder, if you're listening to this podcast, but you want to be watching it, this podcast is part of the Department of Hoops, a DMV media network on YouTube. It's a great place for all of your local hoops needs. So be sure you're hitting the subscribe button there. You can go to youtube.com/@Department of Hoops. You, of course, can follow this show. There's great Wizards coverage there and all things local basketball. So make sure you are following Department of Hoops on YouTube if you want to be watching this show. The Terps are coming off a 111-57 win over St. Francis last night, and it's a great win. We've seen it a bunch this year, but it's kind of getting ho-hum at this point because Maryland is just beating down all of these overmatched low major schools, which is exactly what you want to see, but not that much fun to talk about once you get to, mid to late December here. So what I want to do today is I want to talk about a bigger picture topic. It's, can Maryland win the Big Ten? I think we've very clearly seen over the course of the first, call it 2 months of the season or so here, that Maryland is capable of beating any team on any given night. They're 9-2. They've beaten down all these overmatched opponents. They have a really nice home win against Ohio State, which was also a major beatdown, 83-59. And they have a couple close losses to some really good teams, one on the road against Purdue and one at home against Marquette. But Marquette is looking like a top 10 team, one of the best teams in the country. So this Maryland team has shown, I think, through almost 2 months of the season, they're very capable of beating anybody on any given night. But can they be consistent enough on a night in and night out basis to win the Big Ten? That is the big question for me, and that's what I want to talk about coming out of this dominating performance against St. Francis. Again, Maryland wins 111-57, but there's only so much you can say about these wins and about these games at this point, because to their credit, and this is a great thing because we haven't always seen this in the past, whether it was the past couple of years under Willard, we haven't seen margins like this, or in the Mark Turgeon era, these games have not always gone this way. So I feel like I'm taking it a little bit for granted right now, but when you see it time and time again, when you know that the expectations are now higher for this team, you want to talk about some things that are maybe a little bit more exciting, maybe have a little bit more big picture implications. So let's do just that. Can the Terps win the Big Ten this season? I have 5 questions that I want to ask that I think the answers to those questions will determine whether that's possible or not. But first, let's take a look at the Big Ten landscape, because to me, this is a league that appears very wide open at the moment. There's a lot of very good teams in this league. You look at them, you look at the league, you'll look at where they stand in some of the computer rankings, KenPom being one of the most popular advanced analytics rankings, and there's a lot of Big Ten teams between, let's call it the 14 and 22 range. In fact, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams in the Big Ten are between 14 and 22, and that includes Maryland checking in at number 17. But there isn't a single Big Ten team ranked better than 14th in KenPom. So like many years, the Big Ten has a ton of depth, a ton of very good teams, but maybe not a great team. And that's partly why we've seen the Big Ten go through this long national championship drought. The last team to win a national championship while a member of the Big Ten was Michigan State back in the 2000 season. Of course, Maryland won it in 2002, but was an ACC member at the time. So this isn't uncommon for the Big Ten. Yes, last year, Purdue, very legit national championship contender, but in many years in the Big Ten, it's a conference with great depth, but maybe not a truly elite national championship caliber team. And I think that's largely what we're seeing this year in the Big Ten. A lot of teams that are going to end up with 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 seeds, maybe not a ton of teams that are going to end up with a 1 or 2 seed, especially given how much the SEC has dominated in non-conference play so far this season. We could be looking at a case where the SEC could end up with 2 or 3 even number 1 seeds. The ACC did that one time, 3 number 1 seeds. This could be a year where we see like Tennessee, Auburn, Alabama maybe all end up with number 1 seeds. Kentucky certainly is in that mix right now. Florida undefeated right now. The SEC has had an unbelievable non-conference schedule and is really, really strong. So that's what I kind of see from the Big Ten right now. You also look at the betting odds for the Big Ten, and you see a lot of teams kind of in the mix. Depending on where you look, it varies a little bit here, but I'm just going to use DraftKings as an example. UCLA, the favorite, plus 380. Michigan just behind them at 4-1, plus 400. Then Michigan State plus 550. Purdue plus 600. Illinois plus 850. Oregon 10-1. Maryland 11-1. Penn State 16-1. Ohio State 20-1. Rutgers 30-1. Indiana 40-1. Interestingly enough, Indiana 40-1 on DraftKings, only 20-1 at Caesars. That is a very interesting discrepancy there. But there are a lot of teams that you can see are kind of between 4-1 and 20-1 or so, or even between 4-1 and 11-1 with UCLA, Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue, Illinois, Oregon, and Maryland. That's a lot of teams that people feel like have a chance to win this league, that the betting market feels like has a realistic chance to win this league. And then when you go back and you reference those KenPom rankings, one of my favorite things about KenPom is that there are projections, rest of the season projections for KenPom, and KenPom projects UCLA right now to win the league at 14-6, but then 3 more teams, Michigan State, Michigan, and your Maryland Terrapins, to finish at 13-7. Illinois, Oregon, and Purdue to finish at 12-8. Penn State at 13-9. So that's a ton of teams. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 teams all within 3 games of each other when it comes to conference record. I say all of that to just illustrate this league feels very wide open. This league doesn't feel like it has a dominant team in it right now. This league feels like it's very much up for grab. So why can't Maryland win it? Why not Maryland? Given what we've seen through 9 games, given that they're 9-2, given that they got off to a 1-1 start in conference play, there are 3 teams right now sitting at 2-0. That's UCLA, Michigan State, and Michigan. Why can't Maryland win the Big Ten this year? Here are the 5 questions I think need to be answered affirmatively, that need to be answered yes if Maryland is going to win the Big Ten. First, my first question here, can Maryland force turnovers against high-quality competition the way they forced it against low-major, mid-major competition? Because over the course of the year, Maryland has been one of the best teams in the country at forcing turnovers. In fact, they are forcing a turnover on just over 22% of their opponents' possessions. That's really, really good. That is something, if you could keep that number up over the course of the season, that is excellent. That's a top 25 type number, certainly. And Maryland's been great at it, and they've been really good at doing it against the Canisiuses of the world, against the St. Francis's of the world. But when you look at top 50 T-rank opponents, and T-rank is another advanced analytics site, much like KenPom. It's barttorvik.com. It's a really cool website, a fun one to play with, lets you do a lot of different filters. One of the things you can filter on is how a team fares against a top 20, 50, 100, whatever opponent. Well, I filtered that to top 50 opponents. When you look at Maryland's games against top 50 Torvik opponents, that's Marquette, Ohio State, and Purdue, they're only forcing a turnover on 11.7% of possessions. That's, almost half as good as what they're doing on the season, just over 22%. They lost the turnover battle to Marquette 13-8, and they lost the turnover battle to Purdue 10-8. They only were able to force 8 turnovers in each of those games. So that's a big question for me, is clearly when Maryland has more talent, more athleticism, length, I use that word length and athleticism about this team and its defense all the time because I think they have it, and they have it in a big way, and that can overwhelm an overmatched opponent, and an opponent that doesn't have that isn't at that level, that doesn't have this level of skill. But can they do it consistently once they get into Big Ten play and they're playing teams like Purdue and Marquette on a more consistent basis? Now, not everybody in the league is a Marquette. Not everybody in the league is a Purdue. But the teams that Maryland is going to be facing in Big Ten play are going to be a lot closer to Marquette and Purdue than they are going to be to Bucknell, to Alcorn State, to Florida A&M, Mount St. Mary's, Manhattan, those types of teams. So that's question number one for me. Can Maryland force turnovers against high-quality Big Ten competition like they have against low-major competition? Question number two, if Maryland wants to win the Big Ten, can they continue to shoot the three ball as well as they have? Because that was a huge question for me coming into the season. That has been the Achilles heel of the Terps over the past couple of seasons. It's well known at this point. Last year, Maryland shot under 30% from beyond the arc, 28.9% from beyond the arc, good for 347th in the country. It was really, really bad. Well, they've improved tremendously in that aspect of the game. I can't talk right there. They've improved tremendously in that aspect of the game this season. Maryland on the year, 36.4% from beyond the arc. That's good for 76th in the country. A massive, massive improvement year over year. And Maryland has continued to look better and better with the way they're shooting the basketball from beyond the arc. What gives you even more confidence is it's not just one guy doing it right now. Maryland's three best three-point shooters and the guys who are taking about 2/3 of their three-point attempts are Jacoby Gillespie, Selton Miguel, and Rodney Rice. Gillespie over 42%, Miguel over 40%, and Rodney Rice sitting at 37.5%. These are the guys taking the vast majority of your threes, and these are all guys that have been consistently knocking it down over the course of the season. It's not just a one-man band. It's not just a one-man show when it comes to the improvement from beyond the arc. And I think that should give Maryland fans a lot of confidence that they can keep this up. You look at the past couple of years. Last year, Purdue was excellent from beyond the arc. And, that's going to tend to happen when you have a guy like Zach Edey sucking up all the attention inside. Makes for some real easy three-point looks. Purdue, in conference play last year when they won the Big Ten, shot 41.8% from three-point range. That's excellent. That's really unbelievable in conference play. But Maryland, with guys like Julian Reese, with Derek Queen on the inside, attracting a lot of attention, why can't Maryland create a lot of those same open looks like Edey did for his teammates at Purdue, for Braden Smith, for Fletcher Lawyer? Well, I think they can, and I think we've seen it so far this season, that those guys attracting attention and bringing in guys like Gillespie, Miguel, Rice, all three newcomers, all three guys who were not on the team last year, it's been a great combination, and if Maryland wants to win the Big Ten, they're going to have to continue around this pace. They could see a little bit of a drop-off, and I think that would still be okay. I'm not necessarily expecting Maryland to shoot almost 42% in Big Ten play like Purdue did a season ago. But if they can stick around, 35%, I think Maryland is going to be in for a very, very good Big Ten season. My third question here, and it's something we saw happen last year with Jahmir Young, is can Jacoby Gillespie avoid getting worn down in Big Ten play? Last year, we saw it. The past couple of years, we really saw it with Jahmir Young, where he was forced to carry an extraordinarily heavy load as an undersized guard in a very physical league, where he was playing a lot of minutes on a night in and night out basis. And it felt to me like it started to show at the end of each of those seasons. And Jahmir Young was a great addition to this Maryland team when Kevin Willard first came in. He was a revelation in 2023. He was the only guy really keeping that team afloat along with Julian Reese last year to cause it to avoid a complete disaster, like an 8-20 type of disaster, keeping Maryland just around 500 last season. But he was getting worn down. And it's something Maryland's going to have to avoid with Jacoby Gillespie, a similar type of guard. Gillespie a little bit bigger than Jameer Young, but still it's not like he's a Gravis Vasquez 6'6" point guard or anything. Jacoby Gillespie is listed at 6'1", 186 pounds. So he is not a huge guard. At Belmont, his freshman year, he was listed at 6 foot, 175 pounds. So look, there's some similarities there between Jacoby Gillespie and Jameer Young, and it's something we're really not going to know the answer to until we see it in Big Ten play. In some of the bigger, closer games Maryland's played this year, against Marquette, he played 36 minutes, against Villanova, 38 minutes, and against Purdue, 37 minutes. Can Maryland find some ways to steal some minutes from the bench and get Gillespie a little bit of a breather and save him at times? Can Maryland blow some teams out maybe and limit his minutes in the second half? I think that's going to be one of the keys for them. Now, this does bring me to something interesting from last night's game, because we've seen when Gillespie is out, we've seen Jay Young and Deshaun Harris-Smith play a lot together. Kevin Willard has talked about, since moving Harris-Smith to the bench, how important that is for allowing Harris-Smith and Young to be on the court together and give Jay Young a little bit of a break with another ball handler on the court, where all the pressure is not on him to handle the ball. Well, last night, Harris-Smith played just 4 minutes, and Willard was asked after the game in his post-game presser if there was any reason why, and he said, no, just coach's decision. I don't know what that means. I don't necessarily know what's going on, but I do think it's going to be critical to have Deshaun Harris-Smith on the court over the course of Big Ten play. I think it's going to be important to avoid Jacoby Gillespie getting worn down, because although Harris-Smith is not a point guard, again, Willard has talked a lot about the need to have another ball handler on the court with Jay Young when he's out there playing backup point guard minutes, to give him another ball handler, to make sure it's not all on him. And Maryland needs to be able to still run an effective offense when Jacoby Gillespie is not out there on the court, to get him a break and avoid him getting worn down. So that's going to be really the big thing to me with avoiding that for Jacoby Gillespie, is how effective can Jay Young and Deshaun Harris-Smith be handling the ball when Gillespie is not on the court? Fourth question. Can Julian Reese continue to stay out of foul trouble? He has been pretty good this season. It's something that's plagued him throughout his career. He fouled out against Purdue, and that's been kind of the one glaring example where he really got in big-time foul trouble in a game that was close and mattered. Against Villanova, he only picked up 1 foul. Against Marquette, it's kind of hard to tell because he had 3 fouls in that game. He didn't play a lot down the stretch, and that was a Kevin Willard decision. It wasn't really because of his foul issues, but by and large, I would say Julian Reese has been pretty good at staying out of foul trouble, save for that Purdue game. And that Purdue game is concerning because that is the kind of game that they're going to be facing night in and night out in the Big Ten. So can Julian Reese continue to stay out of foul trouble and stay on the court? Because look, when Julian Reese and Derek Queen are both on the court together, when Maryland's starting 5 is out there, and they've found a really effective starting 5 right now with what they have in Jacoby Gillespie, Rodney Rice, Selton Miguel, Derek Queen, and Julian Reese, when they have those 5 guys out there, they're a really, really hard team to beat. And part of that is making sure that Julian Reese can stay on the court. So can he continue to stay out of foul trouble? That's my 4th big question in regard to whether Maryland can win the Big Ten or not. And then my last question is, can Derek Queen continue this level of play when he has to face Big Ten big men, Big Ten defenses night in and night out? Because over the course of this season, I feel like we've almost taken it for granted how good Derek Queen has been. Derek Queen has not just been one of the best bigs in the country. He has not just been one of the best freshmen in the country. He has been one of the best players in the country. Evan Maya is a website I really like, evanmiya.com, EVANMIYA.com. It's a website I really like because of its player ratings. And he does these player ratings. He uses a number called BPR, which basically it's just a player rating. It takes into account offense and defense. And Derek Queen is the number 19 player in the country in those ratings. Number 19 player in the country. Again, not number 19 freshman, not number 19 big man, number 19 player in the entire country. I mean, Derek Queen is playing at a borderline All-American rate right now. That's how good Derek Queen has been. He's one of the smoothest players I've ever watched. He's one of the most intelligent players I've ever watched. He's one of the most versatile players I've ever watched. The man has it all. The big blizzard can do everything. He has been an absolute joy to watch over the first 2 months here of the season. But he's got to start facing Big Ten defenses every night and Big Ten bigs. The Big Ten has a well-deserved reputation for being one of the most physical and toughest leagues in the country. It's traditionally a slow-paced league where you are going to have to fight for every single bucket that you get. Right now, there are 5 teams and Maryland, so 6 teams if you include Maryland, in the top 20 of KenPom's defensive efficiency rankings. These are teams that pride themselves on defense. 17 of the 18 teams are in the top 100 of KenPom's defensive efficiency rankings. Everybody in the Big Ten can play defense. The only team outside of the top 100 is Rutgers. And Steve Pikiell, that's what he's built that whole program, his whole reputation on. It's a different year for Rutgers because they brought in some very highly touted 5-star guys. They're trying to figure some things out. But Rutgers has built their whole program on defense. So everybody, including Rutgers, can guard in the Big Ten. There's also some really good defensive big men in the Big Ten. There are 7-footers galore. Omar Ballo at Indiana is a guy that comes to mind. Danny Wolf, a Yale transfer who's now at Michigan, alongside his running mate, Vlad Golden, the FAU transfer who came over with Dusty May from FAU. He was part of that Final Four team a couple of years ago. Those are 2 guys that are 7-footers that can kind of match what Queen and Reese are doing at Maryland with that kind of Twin Towers deal. Indiana, I mentioned it, Omar Ballo already, but Indiana can also kind of match the Twin Towers deal with Malik Renault and Omar Ballo and Mackenzie Mbako as well. They have 3 guys that aren't quite 7-footers. Renault and Mbako are 6'9", but Ballo is a legit 7-footer there. They have some really good bigs. These are teams with size, with physicality, and even the teams that don't necessarily have a great defensive big typically have very, very good defensive systems. So this is a question to me. It has nothing to do with what Queen has done so far because he has been excellent. He has been sensational. He has been everything you can possibly want and more. But once you get into the Big Ten, it's a different ballgame. And this is similar to me to my third question was, can Jacoby Gillespie avoid getting worn down? There is a physicality to Big Ten play. There is a different level of intensity in Big Ten play, and that's an open question mark for me as we move into Big Ten play and see if Maryland can win this league. I think it's entirely possible Maryland can win this league. I think Maryland has just as good of a chance, really, as anybody else in the league right now. I personally have placed a bet on Maryland at 11-1 to win the league. I think there's good value on that, and I'm not somebody who likes to bet on my own team unless I feel very good about it. So I think Maryland can win this league. It's, again, very clear. They can beat anybody in this league on any given night. It all comes down to consistency. Can they do it night in and night out? And can they force turnovers against high-quality competition like they have against the low majors? Can they continue to shoot the 3-ball well? Can they avoid Jacoby Gillespie getting worn down? Can Julian Reese continue to stay out of foul trouble? And can Derek Queen continue to be a top 20 player in the country? As unbelievable as that sounds, that's how good he's been. Can he continue to play at that level once the Terps get in to Big Ten play and he has to face excellent defenses and physical Big Ten big men night in and night out? Those are the 5 questions that will determine to me whether Maryland can win this league. Tell me what you think. Can Maryland win the Big Ten? Do they have it in them? Hit me up on social media, again, across all platforms. At Gorgon Sports is the handle everywhere. Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok. I am on it all. Hit me up there. Leave a YouTube comment. I want to know what you think. I want you to be part of the show. Real quick before we get out of here, I want to talk about Maryland's next game. They take on Syracuse this weekend in Brooklyn, and Syracuse is a team that has had a challenging season so far. This is not vintage Syracuse. Syracuse right now ranks 107th in KenPom. They're 5-5 on the season. Their best win so far this year is a game against Cornell. Now, they've lost to some really good teams like Texas, like Tennessee, like Texas Tech, but they also have a loss to a Notre Dame team that's 6-5. They have a loss to a Georgetown team that, while they look a lot better this year, they're 8-2. This is a team that went 9-23 last season, 2-18 in the Big East. This is not a Georgetown program. It's not a vintage Georgetown program either. They've brought in some transfers. They do look a lot better. I think they are a lot better, but still, it's not like this is a Final Four caliber Georgetown team. Syracuse is struggling a bit this season under second-year head coach Red Autry, who took over for Boeheim, and this is a game that's a real tricky spot for Maryland. It's a game a few days before Christmas. It's not at home. It's not on the road. It's neutral. Brooklyn's neutral. I mean, Syracuse is far from Brooklyn. I think it'll be a pretty split crowd there, especially given the excitement around Maryland right now and the lack of excitement around Syracuse. But it's still away from Xfinity Center. Anytime you have to leave Xfinity Center, it's a challenge. Again, a game just a few days before Christmas, and it's one where you're gonna, I think, have to bring your own juice, because I think it's a real thing. Like in football, you can look ahead to the bye week. I think teams do that. They have their last game before the bye. They look ahead a little bit. Maryland could be looking ahead to a week off. Maryland won't play again until December 28th against Maryland Eastern Shore. There's a real chance to get away, to celebrate the holidays, have some time off, relax after the semester's over, after these first couple months of the season. I think it's a real thing that a team could be looking forward to. So to me, it's a tricky spot for Maryland, but this is a Syracuse team that, if Maryland is Big Ten championship caliber, if Maryland is the team that I think they can be, you have to go out and you have to win this game. Syracuse has not been good defensively this season. They're ranked 170th in KenPom's defensive efficiency rankings, and they are a team that has been absolutely drilled inside the arc. Teams are shooting over 56% against the Orange from inside the three-point line. Never has that been more evident against Georgetown. Georgetown's 75-71 win over Syracuse. Georgetown goes 23 of 32 at the rim. Their guards were getting into the lane, getting buckets. Their bigs were getting buckets at the rim. Syracuse really is kind of lacking in the rim protector department, and Syracuse does not have a lot of players who are rated well defensively. I'm going to go back to those Evan Maya ratings again. Evan Maya does not have a single Syracuse player in his top 50 ACC defensive player ratings. Not a single Syracuse player is in the top 50. So to me, this is a game where Julian Reese and Derek Queen need to really thrive, where Jacoby Gillespie needs to get to the basket, where Deshaun Harris-Smith, if he gets the minutes in this game, can get a full head of steam, get downhill, get to the basket, and I don't think there's really going to be anybody to stop him inside. Eddie Lampkin is a name that you may remember from a couple years ago. He was a big man at TCU when they went on a little bit of a run in the NCAA tournament. He's a guy that's been around for a while. He played at Colorado last season. He kind of became a household name during the first weekend of the NCAA tournament. They almost pulled an upset against Gonzaga in the second round. And he's a real big guy, a fun player to watch, and he's their best defensive player. But he is not a rim protector. He's a guy that's really more offensively focused, a really good scorer inside. I think Maryland, if they get to the basket, if they utilize Derek Queen and Julian Reese, if they get downhill, it can be a game where Maryland really creates some open looks, and especially if they're getting Syracuse to collapse on those guys and kicking it out for some open threes as well. So it's a tricky spot for Maryland, just based on the timing of the game, but based on this Syracuse team and how they've played this season, it feels like a game that if Maryland is serious about what they can be, what we think they can be, it's a game that they go out and win. Thanks so much for joining me today on another episode of the Route 1 Rundown. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. I always appreciate anybody who tunes in and spends a part of their day listening to me talk about Maryland hoops. Enjoy the Syracuse game this weekend, everybody. And until next time, this has been the Route 1 Rundown.